Hey, everybody. Today we talk about health tech investing, and my guest is Gemma Bloemen. She's a VC at Creandum, and that's a $500 million fund, and they invest in, among other things, health tech and tech more broadly. She's also an angel investor, so she's invested in 10 or so companies herself, so she knows a thing or two about obviously investing from a personal perspective and passion investing, I want to call it, but also taking care more financially on the VC side and that side of investing too. Creandum invests in seed and Series A. They do tickets up to 20 million. So if you want to know how to get money from a fund like that, what they might be looking for, you're going to find that information in this one. Also, Gemma knows a thing or two about growing a tech company too. She was one of the first people at Uber. She's ex-Yale, INSEAD, McKinsey, and she was COO at Elder as well, a big health tech company, helped them raise a Series B there. And she was there through all of the COVID stuff too. So this one is a great episode if you're interested in health tech investing, great episode if you're a founder and you want to know what someone like this looks for. And if you're after a bit of angel investing cash, if you're after a bit of fund cash, if you're at seed or Series A level, have a listen to this one. Enjoy. Yeah, Gemma, it's a pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks, James. I really appreciate you having me.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, it's an honor.
You're very welcome. I'm intrigued. Whereabouts are you speaking to us from today? Because it sounds like you guys have got operations in quite a few different places.
Yes, we do. I'm speaking to you from London. I'm actually currently at home. That's just because our current office is quite busy while we are awaiting moving into our new office location in the middle of Soho.
Oh, very nice.
But we also have offices in Berlin, Stockholm, and San Francisco. And while I do frequent those occasionally, I am based in London. I'm originally Dutch, which some of your listeners might have picked up on already by now. But I am based in London.
Excellent. Well, Gemma, listen, as I say, absolute pleasure to have you on. You've got an incredible background as an operator turned now investor, both as a VC and an angel investor. So definitely keen to pick your brain on a few of those different things. And Creandum and setting up the London office and everything that you're doing with the firm. Super excited to hear about your story. And yeah, for me and our listeners, why don't you tell us the long version?
The long version. Well, I guess since it's a Healthtech podcast, I can start like a really, really long time ago. So I grew up in the Netherlands. My parents were very, very middle class Dutch, but my mom actually also worked in healthcare, and she still does. She works at a charity that represents the rights of deaf children. She's actually retiring this summer, so I'm going to her retirement party. She worked at the same place for 35 years. But yeah, I guess that's what kind of piqued my original interest in healthcare, as well as the fact that she's actually handicapped and she's lived with a handicap for 40 years, including my entire lifetime, and that has exposed me to the healthcare system a lot over the course of my life. And has made me, very interested, I guess, to make a positive impact in that space. I grew up in the Netherlands, left when I was 18, studied at Yale in the US, actually studied psychology, but also like a wide range of other things. And then afterwards, did not go into healthcare, but ended up, as many from my university did, at McKinsey in consulting. Did that for about 2.5 years. Realized it probably wasn't my long-term cup of tea. The type of clients we work for didn't necessarily inspire me. And ended up doing my MBA at INSEAD, lived in Singapore. And then, was deciding whether to go back to McKinsey or try something else. And that's when I first, I guess, got interested in tech and really joining a technology company. And I was talking to some of the bigger companies, but I also ended up speaking to an alum from INSEAD who had just joined Uber in London to really get operations going there. And she and I spoke, and that was now, I think, almost close to 10 years ago, probably 9.5 years ago. And she said, hey, why don't you not go back to McKinsey and instead join me. We're looking for people with kind of an analytical background who are not afraid to roll up their sleeves, because this thing is going to take off and we're going to grow. And I ended up joining the team in London, moved there. And yeah, I've been here ever since. So it's around 9 years now. And in the first few years that I was at Uber, the team grew, and the business operations there grew more than 10 times. I led a few different teams there, mainly focusing on growth and expansion, both within kind of the London region, but I also managed one of our regions within the UK for a while, the Northeast. And during my final year there, I also led Women of Uber, which is kind of our ERG. So I was involved in all the kind of interesting things that went down there in relation to Travis, who ended up leaving, and then working with the senior leadership across the whole firm to build bridges and repair, I guess, from a culture perspective. On the back of that, I ended up leaving end of 2017, and I joined Elder, a home care marketplace. Very much inspired, I guess, by the experience with my mom, who's a single mom, and at some point will need full-time care. The idea of enabling people to grow old in their own home really appealed to me, and I ended up working there as the chief operating officer for 3.5 years, helping them scale, also raise their Series B. So I know what it's like to sit on the other side of the fundraising table. And go through that process. And during that time, COVID hit. Working in elderly care over COVID felt like a very, I guess, important contribution to the whole strategy that was going down, but also not necessarily the most fun place to be at that point. So in my spare time, I started doing some angel investing and working with early stage founders that were working on impactful topics, helping them get their business off the ground. And I ended up angel investing in around 10 or so companies, primarily in the climate and health tech space. So some of the health tech companies I invested in are, for example, like the Lowdown in London, Jude also in London, Exact Health in Germany. I worked together with those founders and realized that was so much fun. Like working with early stage founders, helping their dreams become a reality. I felt that my background was very valuable, and I could help them both with the business building, but also from an introductions perspective. And that's what then ultimately inspired me to consider moving into VC full time. And that wasn't something that I really ever considered. I thought it was going to be more similar to the consulting experience, where you work, on a lot of spreadsheets and not necessarily get to be closely involved. But I realized that when you do early stage venture, it's actually quite different, and you work very closely together with founders, and you actually get to work on incredibly inspirational topics and ideas and be part of that journey. So then I ended up meeting the Creandum team 2.5 years ago. And Creandum, as you already mentioned, it's an early stage VC fund. We do seed and Series A, tickets up to 20 million. Been around for 20 years, actually. And before I joined, the team was very fortunate to partner with some incredible companies, as you already mentioned a few. And then I was really inspired by the people I met there, by the founders I spoke to who had worked with Creandum in the past, and how well they referenced. And it was so incredibly important for me to join a fund that was on the side of the founder. And that really was there kind of through trials and interrelations and ultimately added value in a positive way. So they, at that point, were looking to open a London office and hire somebody who had ties into the local angel and VC community. So that worked out perfectly, and I ended up joining them in the summer of 2021. One of their GPs moved over, and we opened the office here. We're now 10 people on the ground. It's been an incredible 2 years. And we're about 15 companies in now in London. The first one is, as you already mentioned, was Depop in 2016. And in the past few years, since we've opened the office, we've, I think, added 6 companies to our portfolio here. So it's slowly, but it's very steadily growing. I just came back from maternity leave a few months back, so I was out for the fall, but now very much back into the swing of things.
What a story. The first thing I want to say actually is that it sounds like in your career you've actually found VC from not the traditional, oh, hey, I want to be a VC. You actually found VC through, first of all, being an operator, which I just feel is incredibly important for especially the type of VC that you want to be, a very hands-on, able to help. You seem to get enjoyment from actually being very useful to these founders. It seems to be what you enjoy, that feedback loop of actually being able to add value. The reasons that you like Creandum is because they add value. They're on the side of the founder, and those things I will interrogate in a second. But it's a really nice kind of story arc that you've got to your career there, of actually providing loads of value to the companies that you've been part of, and then actually genuinely wanting to pass that value back, and actually finding your way to early stage venture to where you are now, and by no means at the end of your career, but certainly an exciting part of it. I want to take you back though. I want to go all the way back to the earliest, or one of the earliest points of your career here, because I'm nosy and just because I think this is really interesting. You did psychology at Yale. You went to McKinsey, relatively uninspired by the work there. But then did the MBA and INSEAD. I mean, this reads like a who's who of like places to get your education. Yale, INSEAD, etc. But I won't dive too much into that.
I was a nerd.
You must have a heck of a network, is all I'm saying. After this, honestly, like your classmates must be running the entire planet. But right, Uber. Tell me about Uber, because this is interesting. You brought into Uber at a really early stage. I think I read somewhere that it was, double digits of employees and up to 250 or something. But you were part of a really quick growth phase of Uber there, and you were over growth and expansion. So, certainly in part, or probably quite a lot, due to yourself and your work there. Tell me about a company like Uber and growing a company like Uber so quickly. And I'm interested in how that relates to the advice that you now give in health tech. What did you learn from that period in Uber, that fast growth, that expansion, that sort of dominating technology, almost like generation defining technology? Tell me about it. I'm super interested in this.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I always say that I learned some of the best things about growth and some of the worst things about growth while I was at Uber, and I try to, I guess, leverage both of those in the advice that I now give. I think from the good side, I think some of the things that Uber did very, very well that are still benefiting the company today is, first of all, it hired exceptional people, and it was really, I think at that point, globally, when it started growing, the like number one career destination for talented individuals, because it actually gave people a lot of autonomy. And it wasn't like a tech company where at that point where the only interesting jobs were really engineering, and otherwise you had to go into sales. It was a company where you could own a P&L, and you could be in charge of very complex problems and like growth areas in many, many different countries, and really tackle very, very exciting topics. And as a result, Uber was able to attract some of the best talent, I think, globally in each of the market that it operated in. And I think that's one of the things that they did really well. Like, I think one of the success factors of Uber's expansion and growth was that they decided to hire talent locally and really give power to those teams to execute and to do what worked well in that region, and to grow within the local culture and within the local cities. And if they had tried to do all of that from headquarters in San Francisco, I don't think they would have been as successful. So in terms of how that translates into the advice that we give to companies now, like for example, a lot of the companies that we partner with in Europe around Series A are thinking around how do we expand into the US? And a lot of the companies that we partner with at seed stage are thinking, how do I expand into other European countries? And one of the key pieces of advice that we often give is hire locally. Have a team there. Maybe if you move to the US and it's going to be an important market for you, maybe actually one of the founders should move there. But have a presence and think about how you build up the team there, the office there, the culture, and how you maintain that across across the ocean. And I think that is something that Uber did very well. And really keeping the bar high as well. So for example, at Uber, I was part of this task force, which is called bar raisers, and it was people that were well performing in specific regions that actually helped interview in other regions. So where you didn't have a vested interest in making sure that the seats were filled, but where the only role that you had on the interview panel was to make sure that we kept the bar consistently high across geographies and that we only hired great talent. And if you look now, like Uber alums are everywhere. Like, I mean, Creandum has partnered with an ex-Uber company called Timber Hub in Amsterdam. Like, so many of my friends went on to start their own companies. A lot of them are working in VC. It's people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. But they're now everywhere in the ecosystem, and I think that's one thing that I've taken with me throughout my career. It's just the incredible importance of hiring the right people and the best people and enabling them to do their best. Now, some of the things I think on the flip side that I learned about hypergrowth that I try to caution people against are one is I think Uber wasn't necessarily always the most capital efficient in terms of how they deployed their money, because they always had so much money that they had raised that they didn't necessarily always have to think about the ROI of the initiatives that they implemented, the ROI of additional headcount that they added. And as a result, I think it took a long time, and maybe they're still in the process of actually finding out what the leanest way is to run the operations. And in a company that is fundamentally a low margin business, and where you're competing with other companies that might have more efficient capital structures, that actually matters a lot. So that's why one of the pieces of advice that I now give founders that I partner with is don't raise too much too soon. And if you do raise, make sure you have a clear plan of how you deploy that money and that you only use what you need, rather than finding ways to spend the money when you don't actually need it, because you want to build an efficient capital structure over time. And if you blow up too much too soon, it's going to be really, really hard to change that over time. And then one of the other pieces, I guess, of learnings that I had from Uber was how important it is to work with regulators and to make sure that you work within the system. And again, something from a healthcare perspective that I spend a lot of time thinking about is making sure that even in the most innovative business models and the most innovative healthcare innovations, we can make sure to bring those to market in a compliant way with the support of regulators, rather than necessarily in an adversarial relationship that doesn't benefit anyone. And then the last thing that I saw from Uber that I take with me is how, from an HR perspective, it is really important to scale your HR and people function at the same pace as you scale the rest of the organization, to ensure that you really stay on top of potential issues that may arise there, and that you train your managers well, and that you have the right escalation mechanisms in case something goes wrong. the right people to speak to in case issues occur. Because it is sometimes, if you're very, very fast growing, very easy to forget about some of these like more backbone functions of the company, like HR, like finance, etc. But the sooner you lay those foundations, and this like the more you scale those with the other functions, the more you kind of protect yourself against potential downside in the future. And I think Uber showed how if you don't do that well, that can potentially end really badly and be very costly to clean up.
Yeah, and some remarkable similarities there actually to healthcare, especially when you talk about regulation and working with the regulators. I think there's so many technologies at the moment, particularly as we look at just the rapid expansion of AI into literally everything, and particularly in large language models and everything there in terms of how regulators have to work with. And actually, I've seen some stuff from Sam Altman actually that he really is trying to help seemingly anyway, help with regulation with what he's doing. He's openly calling for it. He's writing drafts of what regulation could look like and seems to want to be really part of that, and certainly taking heed of what you're saying, which is to work with regulators and actually bring them with you. It's not just a, profit at all cost model here. It's actually like, we're part of as I said before, a generation defining technology that needs to be regulated in the right way. And I think in healthcare, we can feel like that a lot too. We can feel that these technologies can do so much. And actually, even the founders of those businesses are people too that have good intentions, despite them having, many people they have to please with their investors and their shareholders and everything else. In the day, I think people are generally good, and call me naive for saying that, but I do think that. And actually the founders of these companies are too, and they do want to work with regulators to help that stuff. I think what you said about hiring is interesting as well, and hiring exceptional people and hiring locally. I've done a lot of thinking recently about mission, vision, values, culture, and actually how you live your values and how you actually create a culture based on those values. And I think it was interesting where you said you have bar raisers, and I love this concept, bar raisers. And we all know these people in the organization that are obsessed about high standards for themselves, for their team, for the organization. They have high organizational loyalty. They want that for the whole company. And actually to then take them to another geography where, as you say, they have no vested interest in the quality of the team there in their day-to-day, other than just for the company more broadly, and actually helping them hire locally. And I think that is an interesting element as well, just hiring locally and actually accepting that you can build culture based on a new geography that's appropriate for that geography and those people. And so those people can feel a culture that they have built and that they are part of, albeit specifically with bar raisers strategically placed to hire them, or even helicoptered in, dare I say, to like kick that off. But I think there's so many interesting concepts there, and we're doing an event actually about scaling to the US. We're doing that with KHP Ventures in a few weeks' time at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. There's quite a lot of companies going, and we're talking with Cedar Sinai. Actually, they're coming over to do some stuff at that event. And we're talking about scale, and we're talking about moving over to the US. And so much of this shines with me with some of the prelim work we've done for that. But anyway, before I lose myself into that, I want to go back to your journey. You moved to Elder and COO of Elder, I believe. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my role at Elder was quite broad. So I guess from the beginning, the COO title is like one that can encompass so many different things. And it very much depends on the company and the relationship that you have with the CEO in terms of what functions sit under you. It can be one of those where you can wear a lot of different hats also across the company journey. So I wore a lot of different hats that changed pretty much every 6 months or so. So for a while I managed people until we hired a fantastic people leader who could do things much better than I did. For a while I managed data, and similar story. And But I think there was a core, like a few core operational functions that I managed until the end. And first of it, that was the whole infrastructure around carers. And for us, like carers, was everything from hiring and the training and ensuring that our carers were well equipped to do the work that they were doing, to the way that they were supported, and how we helped them. The carers at Elder are self-employed, so ensuring that they had the right tools and such to do their work was very important. But there was also a big logistical element, because they had to go and be matched to people, sometimes very last minute, that needed care and that couldn't be alone without care, and then be helped to get across the country to maybe a remote place in Scotland within a day. So I also managed the matching pieces there, and the marketplace pieces. And then the clinical pieces. Even though we didn't get involved in the clinical care ourselves, we did have a clinical team, of course, to ensure that we had the right safeguarding and clinical policies and standards in place, and everything that's related to that. So yeah, I would say it was a very wide role. I really enjoyed it because it was so many different pieces. I got to work with like really exceptional people. It's also really fulfilling to work with carers, and people that work in care oftentimes do that really because they want to give back, and because they value caring for elderly people and helping make those last years of your lives better. And even though it is incredibly tough, like I couldn't be a carer. It takes so much from you emotionally, energy wise, and yeah, the opportunity to day in and day out interact with people who dedicated their lives to this profession was very inspiring.
Well, I think particularly as well because you have that emotional connection to that type of work because of your mum as well and her handicap, and you mentioned like 40 years. It must have been an interesting time, an interesting role, an interesting time, an interesting company to be part of, an interesting sector to be part of. Just because, as I say, you must have felt quite connected to that. And I think when you can connect purpose with your work, you can often see a heck of a lot of synergy, can't you? And it seems to have, well, it certainly hasn't done you any harm, has it, in terms of feeling more connected to the work and that kind of thing, I imagine. But yeah, I don't know. Is that something that chimes with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, purpose has been very important throughout my career. And it's probably one of the most important themes in my life. Like I always think, how can I have the most impact, and how can I have the most impact in this world? And, one of the reasons why I joined McKinsey was because I wanted to learn to have the skills to be able to have impact in the future. And I joined Uber because I felt that Uber was transforming the world in a way that very few companies at the time were. And I still feel that the impact that Uber had, even though in the media may not always be portrayed in a positive way, like Uber provided employment for hundreds of thousands of people and provided a safe and cheaper way to get home for many, 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 many millions of people, including women like myself who might not have had a safe way to get home late at night, for people like my mom if you live in a suburb and you can't hail a taxi, then 10 years ago there was no way to be able to get around because taxis were just not there at the push of a button. And also now, like as an investor, like I think a lot about the impact that our companies have across the world, and I feel that enabling companies, that helping transformational companies grow and build up their footprint in the world is one of the most impactful things that I can do. in my career with the skill set that I have. I think there's other pieces to it too. As a VC fund, a lot of the money that you invest, or all the money you invest, comes from other investors, and most of our investors are pension funds and endowments, and the Nobel Foundation and such, like very reputable investors and causes that I feel very proud to represent as an investor. So yeah, I would say that for me, impact and purpose are probably the driving factors throughout my entire career, and how I think about how I want to live my life.
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to ask you your thesis actually, because I was going to move on to your angel investing now, because to talk about purpose, as they say, investors pick the world we live in next, and it's an incredibly privileged position to be doing so. And actually, people can look at how they want to see the world, and they can then choose the companies that they want based on their own purpose. And I don't know, that side of angel investing has always appealed to me. Less you're investing other people's money in the VC side, if I'm being honest. But certainly being able to, make the impact yourself with the money that you have. And as I say, being able to at least somewhat potentially pick the world we live in next, if you're good at your job anyway, and you manage to do that well. But yeah, I'm interested. So you mentioned angel investing being really fun, and you equated that to, I think, being valuable. And based on your background, you could not only help them practically with advice about how to run their company, but actually with introductions based on the network that you have and things like that. And I guess just being useful to them in that way, and that made that whole process fun for you. You say you picked 10 or so companies in climate and health tech, and obviously you're picking them somewhat to be coachable, I imagine, because you want to be useful and you want to be valuable and all that side of things. But you tell me, those 10 or so companies, what did they have that the other 80 that you saw didn't?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think for me, I looked at companies from a variety of different lenses. I mean, part of it as an angel was about impact, right? And I was investing, my own money, or my husband's and mine money, and there, for me, I always went in with the idea, and I think this is wise if you're an angel investor. It's like, if I lose this money, will I feel good about having contributed to this cause and to this founder? And that's very different from if you're a VC investor and you're investing other people's money, when really like the financial lens is the most important, and the company has to be able to return capital and return a certain amount of capital. And of course, then there's impact lenses and such that you could also put on top of that. But ultimately, the financial piece is the most important one. And as an angel, that impact piece was very important. And part of that is for me, was working with exceptional founders. So almost all the companies I invested in also had female founders, because there is a large shortage of investment, both angel and institutional investment, going into female founders. And that's something that I felt it feels strongly is unjust, and that I could, make a very small difference in the way that I deployed my own capital. I did very small tickets from an angel perspective. So that's where the value add comes into play. Like, most people didn't take me on the cap table for the money that I was bringing. They took me because I could also help in other ways. And so I wouldn't say that I necessarily looked for companies where I could be most helpful, but I do think that that's how I was able to join the rounds of these companies, if that makes sense.
It does.
So a little bit the other way around. And for me, I looked for exceptional people that were building businesses in spaces where I saw a positive impact, but also where I saw a real opportunity and real innovation. Right. So I did mostly pre-seed investments, which means that there isn't much data to go by. but I did very much want to see a vision for a company that was a, unique product in a market where you could actually build a strong business. Why I invested in the companies that I ended up investing in, I would say, probably 50% was founder-led.
Mm-hmm.
Working with exceptional people, backing exceptional people, and helping them. As a pre-seed investor, that is ultimately by far the most important thing.
Yeah. And I love that framework of, as an angel, you are picking causes that you care about, because as you rightly said, if you lose that money, are you still going to be proud to have contributed? Because actually, even if you have contributed to a startup that has tried, that is still progress in that area, particularly if you back yourself to have backed exceptional founders, as you've just said. If you've backed really good founders that were able to do a very good job in that area, trying to do that thing, that is still progress, because those that come afterwards stand on the shoulders, don't they? They know that was tried before in that way, and actually it perhaps needs to be done differently. And I think you can then still feel good about that. And whilst it might be small tickets, well, at the end of the day, you're still supporting, and actually your name means something, and actually your support means something, and you are just doing well in that area. And it brings me back to this thing that I must say this every week, like, people are so impact driven that come on this podcast, and ultimately that is the I guess that is the virtuous cycle where this usefulness and being valuable leads to success for the company, which then leads to more positive energy in your ability to help more people. And I just love that framework, that actually, that even if it doesn't go well, you can write it off as progress. It's why I think selling the purpose is just such a big part of selling to angel investors. And that storytelling
100%.
component, my goodness, it's just so important, because you must have been party to a lot of different pitches, and actually those that are going to win you over, they're going to tell a good story, right?
100%. I as a founder, storytelling is probably one of the most important qualities, and one that's often underrated by founders themselves, I think. But so incredibly important. And also down the line, as you scale and as you raise institutional money, still, like, the ability to tell a great story about your company is what's going to enable you to raise capital. And it's also what's going to enable you to attract great talent and hire senior people that might leave better, well-paying jobs at more, like, at that point, more successful startups, to join you on your journey and to help you make that company great. And it's what's going to inspire your team during the rough times, when maybe you flatlined for a few months, or you had a setback from a product or regulation perspective, and it's what's going to make people follow you instead of quit and work extra hard that weekend to get the bug fixed that you all discovered. Storytelling as a leader, incredibly important.
I can't remember the VC that I had on here that said this, but someone actually said that one of their biggest indicators of success was that they would notice in some of those initial meetings. They must have been a Series A investor or potentially a seed investor, but they said one of the biggest things they'd actually look for is the founder's ability to bring in talent by making them leave an incredibly well-paid, secure job to join their ludicrous idea and vision. And I can't remember who the investor was, but they did say that was something that they really admired in a founder, of like, well, that's quite an indicator for success if they're able to sell that vision to that person. Just thought it was quite funny.
And they're right.
Yeah.
But it's also an essential part of the job. as one of the key roles of a CEO founder is to hire great people and to hire a great team.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And keep on hiring great team members over time.
And that's the challenge, that when you're getting to the Uber growth level, when you're still managing to hire good people, wow. Hats off to you. I want to talk about Creandum. Got a bit of time left. So, seed and Series A, tickets up to 20 million. That's a heck of a seed round. But yes, seed and Series A. Again, tell me about the thesis. Tell me about what you guys invested. I mean, you're taking pension funds, etc., as LPs, so you must have quite a bit. I mean, how many funds have you got? How are they split? What's the size of them? Tell me all about Creandum.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're on our 6th fund right now. We're actually celebrating our 20-year anniversary this summer, and our 6th fund is a $500 million fund that invests in seed to Series A software companies across Europe or European founders abroad. We also have an opportunity vehicle that we deploy primarily in our portfolio companies, so just to enable us to support them all the way to IPO.
Nice.
So that's a kind of separate vehicle on top of our core fund, and anything software or software enabled really is within our thesis. Within healthcare, that means we do software companies such as Virta Health, which is a diabetes management app, or software enabled companies like Kry, which is a full primary care technology enabled healthcare provider. And we tend to be high conviction, low frequency investors, and that means that we don't do many investments, and those that we do, we tend to get quite involved. So most of us in the team that write checks do 1 to 3 investments a year, on average probably 2, and that means that you really have the time to work with those companies and help where they want help, and lean in during those early years where that type of help really matters. We also have a portfolio team that works with our earlier stage companies, and they help on pieces like talent. What should your organization look like in 2 years, and how do we build up to that? And what are the key senior hires along the way, and what would their profile look like? And who should be like the headhunters that help you find them? Who are people that we have in our network that can potentially fit there? We have people in our portfolio team that work on go-to-market, that work on UX, UI, design, data and analytics, like key areas where we feel early stage companies can really benefit from additional support. And I think oftentimes like that personal connection, like working with people in our team on a day by day basis, and like the support that we give both from our portfolio team as well as from the 100 plus companies that we've backed in the past, of which 1 in 6 is now a unicorn. That's why founders choose to partner with us, because we can actually, we're not silent capital. We can actually help you be an even more successful company, and at seed and at A stage that matters.
It does. I've got a couple of questions now, so I believe you. It's worth saying that, but to play devil's advocate, so many funds say they're on the side of the founder, so many funds say they're added value. You've given a lot of reasons why. I mean, not least the commitment that you make in terms of even the size of the check at the stage that you do, but actually the amount of deals that you each do. And I imagine the amount of deals that you each look after, the boards that you sit on, you're probably not stretching yourselves here to actually give yourself the time, which is one thing. You've talked about a sort of like a talent team that's going to help them with strategic hiring and things along those lines. Is there anything else that you guys point to as sort of being on the side of the founder? I mean, added value. Okay, yeah, I can see that from everything that you do in the backgrounds that you have, etc. But is there anything else that points to added value, or indeed, is there anything else that suggests you're on the side of the founder?
And I think you make a very important point, is that like a lot of VCs say this.
And it's hard for founders, right? Because everyone says it, you know?
It is hard. And I think there, like the key thing and the key advice I would have for founders is to do references. When you are looking, when you are in the fortunate position that you can pick which investor you go with, make sure to speak to other founders who have partnered with those funds before. Because there is definitely a difference in how investors show up and how they support when things don't go as well. Well, like how much more money they deploy over time and under what circumstances, how available they are, how present, what the tone of their involvement is. And I can only speak, from my experiences, just when I was deciding which fund to join, I did a ton of references. And I spoke to loads of founders that, for Creandum, that worked with Creandum and that worked with other funds. And I spoke to angels that knew the funds well and other investors that had sat on boards with them. I spoke to LPs because this element was incredibly important to me. And I wanted to join a fund that actually lived up to its reputation of being founder of not just its reputation, but it lived up to its promise of being founder friendly. And I found consistently that everyone I spoke to said that, yes, like Creandum actually is founder friendly, and they actually are the type of people that they promise to be. And this is a team that has the right values. And I found in my referencing that they had, and at least were showing the type of value framework that I identified with. And I think that's ultimately the most important thing that you can do when you're referencing, whether it's for a hire, whether it's for an investor, speaking to people who've worked with them before is going to tell you the real story rather than, what they might tell you. Ultimately, investors can tell you that they're adding value, and I think part of how they show up and how they interact with you can be taken as a proof point for how they are to work with long term. But I would always reference like actual people that have worked with them over a long period of time. And I'm very proud to say that, I really think that Creandum is a long-term partner. And I'm very relieved that once I joined the fund, it actually, the people actually turned out to be the same as I had, the impression I had gotten from the outside in when I was interviewing. And they are truly good people who really care about the companies we partner with and the founders that we partner with. And we see these partnerships as a long-term relationship, like a 10 plus working relationship that we are there to support and help make the founders and the company successful.
Is this latest fund, is this a 10-year fund or is this an evergreen fund, or how are you structured? Because we know in healthcare things can take a long time, but I'm interested because it's software. Maybe you guys are still on the clock.
It's a great question. I mean, officially our funds have, I think, a 10-year horizon.
Yeah.
But in practice, a lot of our positions have been longer.
Yeah,
and we are very fortunate that the investors that invest in our fund are patient and that they know that we don't sell prematurely, and we even if a fund goes above its deployment cycle, that's actually what is ultimately the best financial outcome also for our investors.
Yeah.
Right. So for Spotify, for example, we held that for longer, and it turned out really beneficial.
That turned out just fine.
Invested in our fund.
Yeah. Nice.
And I think we've built that trust with our investors over time that we can hold positions until it's actually in the company's best interest, to exit versus when, fund life cycles. And working with a VC fund that has a steady base of investors that they've worked with over several fund cycles is really beneficial from that perspective, because we don't have to worry about, those type of, concerns that some other funds might have to.
Well, if you're providing good returns, then why on earth would those LPs not just keep investing,
exactly.
right? So, I suppose it's the mark of a fund that can raise 500 million and beyond Fund 6, because actually, if you've managed to deliver a decent return to those LPs, they are just getting richer, so they can just keep investing in the fund, and the good times can keep on rolling, right? So, yes, makes a lot of sense. And as I say, being on Fund 6 certainly points to the success of the previous. A couple of other questions here. So you invest in seed and you invest in Series A. Now, you're in software or software-enabled technologies, and that's what you're investing in. Are there any specific binary milestones that people need at either seed or Series A to approach you at those stages? So do you say, for example, if you are looking for Series A, you need 2 million revenue. If you are looking for seed, you need these metrics of product market fit. Are you looking for any specific binary points, just so if anybody listening is thinking of approaching you, what they qualify some people out for me?
It's a great question. The easy answer there is no. We don't have binary points of exactly what we're looking for at each stage. But the more nuanced answer is that we do look for certain indications, right? And at seed stage, that might be, we normally like there to be a product and some evidence of user love for the product. And that doesn't have to be monetization. That doesn't have to be even the product on the market, but validation of design partners, of like free users, of even it could be tests that you've run, pilots that have shown that, hey, there is an appetite for this and people like it and it's different. And so that tends to be what we look for at seed stage. There's exceptions there, like sometimes even at seed, or sometimes we invest even earlier at pre-seed, and there might be nothing yet, but it's just exceptional people that we have met, or worked with in the past, and they have an idea that we very much believe in, and then we invest just on the back of that. But yeah, at seed stage, we like to have some degree of validation. It doesn't have to be revenue, but validation. At A, we do expect there to be some revenue. So at A, we would be looking for indications that there is product market fit. So people are buying your product. And it doesn't have to be necessarily in consumer, for example, buying. It could be using the product. But, over time, using it and liking it, right? So then it's whether it's a B2B or B2C company, we look at not just growth and usage, but we look at retention. And we look at, if people are paying, how much are they paying, and how is that changing over time? And we do tend to see that most companies at A stage have between, say, 1 to 3 million of annualized revenues. And then it doesn't necessarily mean, you don't have to wait until you have 3 million revenues to go and raise an A round. I mean, at that point, it's more the function, your revenues are more going to determine maybe the multiple and the valuation that you can raise at. But you want to go to market when you have those proof points around product market fit. When you see that, users, or whether they be, companies or organizations or individuals, are using your product, you're growing well, and you have some idea of what it's like, how you can scale the product that you have currently out there. And then, if an investor adds more, gives you more money, how are you going to deploy that? And ideally you'd have some degree of scalability, as in like you have tested different sales approaches and what works. You've just tested some marketing approaches and what works for you and what doesn't. And you have maybe plans to expand into different geographies, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice. I love that phrase, evidence of user love for the product. I think that's a wonderful phrase. Gemma, before I let you go, I mentioned earlier that obviously investors pick the world we live in next, and as an angel investor and as part of Creandum and the amount of capital behind you there's an element of you looking at the world ahead here and you seeing the types of companies coming to you, the ones you're choosing to invest in, the ones you're actually choosing not to invest in. I'm interested from a health tech and healthcare perspective, what is the world that you see that we live in next? What companies are you saying yes to? What companies are you saying no to? What does that next world look like, do you think?
Yeah, great question. I think you touched on this at the beginning, but one of the key trends that we believe in healthcare is that there will be more and more digital solutions and digital clinical solutions, and that AI will also enable a lot more innovation when it comes to the healthcare space in the next few years. Whether that be from an enablement of healthcare practitioners to like actual clinical diagnosis and clinical analysis around different in different parts of the healthcare system, and that ultimately that rate of innovation will be much faster than it has been in the past 10,
so you're talking about
years.
software as a medical device stuff. So you're really thinking about like the software behind some of the diagnostics. And
I mean, that's part of it, right? We think we think AI will also help in a lot of other fields around, enabling practitioners and enabling healthcare professionals. Software as a medical device is definitely a really big one. I mean, one of the companies that I partner with, Scarlett, is a continuous compliance company for healthcare, specifically for software medical devices.
Okay.
And their dream of the future, which I like very much ascribe to, is that software companies should be and medical software companies should be able to deploy updates to their systems and their algorithms as quickly as other tech companies. So that's the patient and the practitioners that they enable are getting the fastest rate of innovation, all like completely, approved by our regulators in a much quicker way. And that's definitely a future that we would love to live in as an investor in healthcare.
Cool. So Gemma, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining me. I think your background is, I think as I said before, like a who's who, or certainly a where to go for all of your education and indeed your career, from Yale to INSEAD to McKinsey to big startups like Uber and Elder and now angel investing and onto Creandum. I think it's a heck of a career you put together. And you guys are making some incredible impact. I think it would be really interesting, I think, for people listening to have a look at Creandum's portfolio and see what you guys are investing in. I'm certainly going to keep an eye on what you're investing in, because I think you've got $500,000 behind you with this fund. And yeah, just very interested to see where it goes. Those big seed rounds, those big Series A rounds with, the second, third time founders that you guys might come across, I think it's a super exciting place to look at. I think there's lots of people that have been in different sectors. I mean, I know you guys cover cross-sector, but there's definitely founders that have been cross-sector that are coming over to health tech after exiting somewhere else and building some really interesting stuff. And I think, you guys are definitely going to be seeing a lot of that. So, delighted to have you on. Thank you so much for telling your story. And for those people listening that want to get in touch with you or Creandum, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, great question. And thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. The best way to get in touch is to email me. I'm Gemma@creandum.com, and you can also follow me on Twitter. I'm just at Gemma Bloemen. But email is by far the best way. I'm not great at LinkedIn. I get so many requests that I unfortunately don't have the time always to go through them. So email is the best.
And you're at Bits and Pretzels in Munich, right?
Yes, I will be speaking at Bits and Pretzels, the healthcare conference, in a few weeks. I think it's the 21st of June, if I'm not mistaken. So that should be interesting as well. Hoping to meet a lot of healthcare founders and fellow investors there.
Awesome. May see you there, Gemma.